And welcome to Texas Ed 911. I have Kristen Bentley here, and my apologies last week. Didn't quite all work out, but we'll be back on Mondays at 9:30 starting today, and we have some exciting things to talk about. There's lots of stuff moving in Austin, some good things that we need to celebrate, and then some warning signs we need to talk about, and some bills we need to step up and stop before they take away our rights. And so Kristen has a crazy busy week. Kristen, tell us what you've got going on.
Well, I'm going to be leaving this afternoon, heading down to the Capitol. We have a House bill that we are strongly supporting, that the RPT strongly supports, called HB 900, that is by Representative Jared Patterson. And that's being heard in the House Public Education Committee on Tuesday morning. And so I'm going to head down there tonight to be there first thing in the morning. And I know we have a ton of parents and grandparents that are coming down to testify on this bill. It's priority legislation, and we were really pleased when the Speaker of the House made it priority legislation. It addresses the sexually explicit book problem that we have in our Texas schools really, really well. And so
good. Can you tell us, what do you mean when you say it's priority legislation, and how does that get determined?
Yeah, so all of these, so the Speaker, he designates priority legislation in the House, and the Lieutenant Governor designates priority legislation over in the Senate, and then the governor has his own priority legislation as well. And so and they're not always the same, but when it comes to the sexualization of Texas kids, we know the governor is very supportive of this priority. And I think that that's very much reflected in the Speaker of the House choosing HB 900 as priority legislation. It completely addresses the Republican Party of Texas priority, Stop Sexualizing Texas Kids. And then, of course, we have Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has two priorities of his own priorities related to the RPT priority, Stop Sexualizing Texas Kids. And his is to address the books, the indecent, profane books that we're finding in Texas schools. And then also he has one designated as a priority that addresses the drag shows that are going on in front of kids. And so we're really glad that all of this basically leadership is very supportive and wants to do something to protect Texas kids this session against sexualization. So
will they vote on HB 900 today or tomorrow, or what exactly should people be expecting based on the hearing tomorrow?
So tomorrow, for HB 900, Jared Patterson will lay the bill out and present it to the Public Education Committee over in the House. And then that's the opportunity for them to have, they'll invite people to testify. So there will be some invited testimony. And we definitely have some parents who have been invited as to testify, which I think is wonderful. Parents are oftentimes, we have to wait all day and then we testify at the end. And I have to say real quickly, for those of us who get stuck testifying at the end, we want really good closers. So when we are, this is a strategy for all these bills, is that it's really good to have some of your strongest testimony at the very end and strongest testifiers at the very end. And so that's just, I think, an important strategy. Someone who's able to go off script a little bit, but be able to do it in a way to address maybe some things that were said in public testimony. So anyway, so we're expecting a lot of people to come down and testify in support of HB 900. And I have no idea how many, but I mean, it's just I'm getting calls and emails constantly about
Uh-huh.
it. And so, I think that we're very organized. Parents have had enough. We are sick of the radicalization of our schools and our libraries,
Mhm.
and we will not tolerate the sexualization of kids. We will not tolerate it. And so there are a lot of parents who are going to come down there and have emotional, compelling testimony. And then what happens tomorrow is it's unlikely that it would get passed out of committee tomorrow. But I think they'll vote on it and they will get it out pretty quickly. I know there's already a committee substitute, and it includes some really good changes. Some of the things that were loopholes that were identified in the original bill, those are closed. So the bill, for instance, will include classroom libraries in addition.
Awesome.
Yeah, so some of those things have been changed in that committee substitute. And because it's priority legislation by the speaker, I mean, it's just expected to have more support because of that, and
Mhm.
should move quickly because of that. So I would expect that it gets voted out, by the end of this week, early next week, and then it'll go on over to the Senate. And then that's when we're going to have to get to work. We need to work on the Senate and educate them on this issue and let them know how much we support this bill and why we support this bill. Which I can tell you why I support it and why our
Yeah, let's talk about that.
yeah, so, what we love about HB 900 is that it creates mandatory library standards for the first time in the state of Texas. So while we have standards in our curriculum that are codified into law, we don't have any standards for our school libraries. We only have recommended guidelines, and these guidelines are developed by TSLAC, which is the Texas State Library and Archives Commission, in consultation with the State Board of Education. And so library associations, librarians, anything dealing with libraries, you can safely assume they're pretty progressive, but extreme. Like in many cases, these organizations are completely radicalized.
Yeah.
Now, TSLAC, I think some of their guidelines, they make sense, but they're just guidelines. And so, what we want in Texas when it comes to collection and development is we want library standards. So that way, they have to do it. It will be a very clear
Mhm.
directive. And in that clear directive of library standards, we want sexually explicit, pervasively vulgar, educationally unsuitable content prohibited, period.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that is a non-negotiable. You know that, Melissa, you serve on the subcommittee for Stop Sexualizing Texas Kids, and that has been one of those things where when I go to offices, I tell them it is non-negotiable. These books have to be prohibited from schools. They need a clear directive, because they've had a year now to remove books. They've been instructed by the Texas Education Agency, and unfortunately, that policy was such a failure, and
Mhm.
and has done nothing to give relief to parents and kids who have these books in their school libraries. So we like that, one of the things that we just absolutely love is that HB 900 creates those standards that prohibit sexually explicit books from being in the library. The other thing that it does is, in order to capture any inappropriate books, it also it requires, the way that it does this is that it requires the vendors to label these books. We don't, the onus should be on the vendor. Right now, when we look at library books, people like us who are auditing, it
Mhm.
is a lot of research. It takes a lot of time. We miss certain ones. I just found a bunch of books recently that I have to add to my list, and they're absolutely disgusting, but some of the worst books I've ever seen.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yes, anyway, I won't go too into that, but that the vendor knows what they're selling, and they know
Mhm.
this bill requires that they label books that are sexually explicit, and then it requires that they label books that are sexually relevant, and and sexually relevant means that it's not necessarily explicit. It doesn't go into graphic detail about sex. It doesn't have pervasive vulgarity and anything really indecent. But it might be a book that talks about reproduction, so it's related to sex education, or it might talk about abortion. Just a variety of topics. So it labels those, and then those books, while the explicit books are just straight out prohibited, the sexually relevant books require parental permission in order to be checked out of the library. So,
And so when we talk about sexually relevant, this is the first time you and I have had this conversation. I've read the bill, and so I can visualize kind of how that's set up. Um, where would, and excuse me, viewers, for having to use this language, there are books that are talk about touching on the outside of the body and caressing and like getting excited and those kinds of things. Where would that fit? Which of those categories?
well, I think that there might be some gray area on those, and but I would think that most of those would contain content that would require them to have a sexually explicit label. Now,
Okay.
and then what happens too, and what I like about this bill is that if they mislabel something, that because it does require that school districts are basically doing this kind of auditing process. So when they have a book that is labeled sexually relevant, I'd have to look at that part of the bill, but they if they think that it was mislabeled, then there's a process to that where the vendor um has to change that to sexually explicit. And I could find that in the bill if you want me to, but I know there's a
Oh,
section.
that's okay. Yeah. No, I think you've answered it. And I know, I mean, I read bills all the time, and my brain can't always go to exactly what I want in a bill, and, and they'll pop into your head just as soon as we stop thinking about it. Um, so, um, so what happens to a vendor who isn't compliant? There's some pretty good enforcement in the bill, right, to make sure that the vendors are actually doing their job.
Yes, so they have to comply, and if they are found to not comply, they're put on a list, and it doesn't matter which ISD, all Texas ISDs cannot purchase books from that vendor.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a very big stick for the vendors.
It is. So, and the way it's worded in the bill, it's not that they can't sell, it's that Texas ISDs can't purchase.
Okay.
It
Mhm.
means the same thing essentially, but yeah, but Texas school districts will not be able to purchase books from vendors like Follett. And Follett is one of the biggest book vendors that provides books to Texas schools. They stand to lose millions of dollars if they don't comply. And
So they
Texas
are gonna have to choose between making a profit or sexualizing children, basically.
exactly. Yeah, because
Okay.
they will be put on a list for noncompliance, um and they will not be able to do business in the state.
Well, I'll tell you, we've Texas Ed 911 and some of the parents here, and you're part of that.
Mhm.
We've had conversations with Patterson's office on this bill as well as the ombudsman bill. And the one thing that I really appreciate about his office is that, and himself, although I've only had one meeting with him, I know you've had a lot. Um, they appear to really be going after what parents want. And when I say that, that's quite the compliment, because as we're going through some of these bills, what we're finding is you feel like you have the ear of the legislator and their staff who is helping create the language. And then you wait for the bill to come out, and you hope that what you've relayed is actually in the bill. The protections that you're asking for parents actually exist.
Yeah.
And what I'm finding is with his office, the intent is pure, and they truly want to get it right, and they truly want to protect children, and they want to protect parents, and allow parents to be those protectors for their children that we are supposed to be. What I'm finding in some, and I don't know that it's so much the office or it's maybe the process, is a bill can look good, but when you actually go through the detail, it actually could be taking rights away. And there
Mhm.
are a few bills right now that appear to be doing more of that than actually helping parents. And
Mhm.
I want to give Patterson and his office just total kudos, because what we have seen is that he is really fighting on behalf of the parents. And I think part of that is he is a parent, and he
Mhm.
specifically dealt with this issue. How much do you think his experience with this issue has colored his approach on this bill?
Oh, I think it just is a reflection of all of that, and I want to see him champion this issue because he's worked so hard within his own district to get something accomplished there, and he has faced, constant pushback from Frisco ISD. They have hundreds of sexually explicit books, and just, I mean, trying to get 1 or 2 removed has been such a tedious process. And I think it's reflective of what goes on throughout the state, whether it's an urban, suburban, or rural school district. We have parents who go through that. And so he has been working on this for a year and a half, and he understands the issue better than anybody up there in the legislature because he's been doing it in his own district. And then I think what happens too is then he's very relatable, and he relates to
Mhm.
us. And so when we've had, I know anybody who has worked with him on this issue has found him to be incredibly receptive and willing to collaborate on ideas. And then I know where he's very strong, and his background is more, I think, in business um, and so he has this business mind, and I know that he and Representative Shaheen, who's also worked on this issue locally and is a big supporter of this bill and has collaborated on this, and he's a co-author on there as well. But they had a meeting with Follett, and I'll tell you that the meeting with Follett, which is a book vendor, and they're the ones that provide most of the library management systems that Texas schools use. The meeting basically, I think, really made it personal for them too.
Mhm.
From what, yeah, and I just mean that they go Follett basically wasn't going to do anything to create transparency and help this issue at all, and basically was kind of had this attitude like, well, if you don't like it, then do something about it. And so they are.
Mhm. So let's do something about it.
Yeah, I love their enforcement mechanism. I think it is effective, and we know that um, we know that those types of enforcement mechanisms are very helpful and very effective. But the other thing I would say too, just to wrap that up, is that his office is wonderful. His chief of staff, Jeffrey Waldock, is so like Jeffrey's not he doesn't have kids yet, and it's not like he's doing the daily grind of what parents who are trying to get books out are, but you would think that he is, because
Uh-huh.
he's so passionate about this bill and so passionate to get this bill passed. And I just love his Representative Patterson has a wonderful staff, all of them.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Mhm.
Do you mind if we pivot a little bit to a couple danger bills? But before we do
No,
that,
we wanna do that. Yeah. We only have 2 minutes
have any
left.
last words on HB 900 before we do though?
Well, just that it's one of those bills that will actually make an impact, and on the first day it's enacted, it will start a process to recall these nasty, filthy books in our kids' schools. And so we just really want everyone to rally behind it, make calls to your own representatives and your own senators. It's the Senate, once it gets out of committee, it's the Senate that we're really going to have to focus on because there's not a companion to this over in the Senate. So we got to push the Senate to get this bill passed.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. And if you guys aren't on texased911.com, if you haven't gone out there and signed up as an ally, please do, because then you'll get our weekly alerts. We just sent one out last night, and we're of course promoting
Mm.
HB 900. And I want to explain just a couple things on HB 900. We have not yet awarded that a courage bill, but I am expecting that tomorrow morning we will be. We have been talking to Jeffrey in the office, and the couple loopholes that we were worried about that were keeping us from being able to call it a courage bill, like you said, I believe are being addressed. And so, so our intent is to be able to scream, even louder tomorrow morning, and reward it a courage bill, because it is definitely that in spirit. I know for sure. And if you guys aren't aware, we have been awarding courage bills and hero bills, and the difference between the two is a courage bill, if it were to be enacted as written, it would have such a significant impact without any significant loopholes that the activist librarians could still access our children with. And so those were just a couple of the loopholes that needed to be fixed. And bills are never perfect, especially I'm learning you don't have a lot of time to fix things before you actually file them. And so we are 100% expecting it will be a courage bill this evening or in the morning. And then a hero bill is just even that much further. Like, just you can't even imagine it being any better. It just truly fixes all the things you could possibly imagine that we are worried about. And so it is also possible that it will just jump straight to a hero bill. I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. And we have some announcements later this week on some pretty exciting hero and courage bills, even from some authors that we wouldn't have expected. And but today we need to talk about a couple danger bills. We did decide this weekend that we are going to unfortunately have to label some bills danger bills. And basically, if we're labeling them danger bills, they don't just take us back a little bit, they absolutely upend our rights as parents and do significant damage to the education system that is already so fragile. And so we have two bills. One is being heard in the House this afternoon in the Youth Health and Safety Committee. It's HB 98, and it actually was heard in the Senate last week. And I don't know that it's actually passed out of that committee yet. Our hope is that it will just die in both chambers. But this HB 98 basically makes schools Medicaid providers, and we have absolutely no need for that. Currently, if someone wants service and Medicaid needs to pay for it, they can get it. We do not need schools providing this service. And what happens is we'd be creating profit centers in our schools. And so then now, on top of all of the mental health screening that's happening without parental consent, we're going to give counselors and administrators effectively the incentive to identify kids who need mental health services. And that's just beyond dangerous. And it's just one additional step towards turning our schools into communities, period, and pushing parents all the way out to the curb. And so we are vehemently opposed to that bill. And then the other bill is HB 1605. And this particular bill, it's got a lot of window dressing. And when you first read it, if you don't know what you're looking for, it can look pretty good. But this one basically expands the authority of the TEA. It codifies something called Amplify, which they don't actually use that word, but it's a statewide curriculum. And the TEA has been testing it in multiple school districts, including West Texas. And Texas Ed 911 had a group of over 30 parents in West Texas who logged into the Amplify system and just looked at every single lesson. And basically what we found was it was full of inappropriate content. It was full of CRT. It was full of DEI. It was full of anti-Christian rhetoric. Anything you could possibly imagine, it was in there. And what's interesting is the TEA commissioner paid for this. My understanding is $50 million. It was not vetted, and he was going around to all the senators and the House reps basically telling them it is the perfect classical curriculum and does not contain any of the things that parents are worried about. Well, then, of course, we as parents, this West Texas group basically proved him wrong, and basically proved that he was pushing content that he had not reviewed himself, and that was the exact opposite of what he was pushing. And so this bill appears to be the TEA's bill that they have taken to some senators and some House reps and said, this is what we need in education. And it would set up a statewide curriculum, which is not appropriate for education, not appropriate for local control, in addition to doing all kinds of other things, pushing teachers to the curb, making it look like they're helping teachers when in reality they'd be turning teachers from educators who nurture our children into facilitators that function more like robots. It is just full of all kinds of problems. So for that reason, this is also a danger bill. There's no redeeming either of these bills. It's not like they just need a few tweaks. And so we are asking people, in addition to supporting HB 900, to also reach out and do everything you can to make sure that your House rep, your senator, as well as we in our alert included the contact information for the committee members. Make sure you contact them and know that these bills, they can't travel. They need to stop exactly where they're at. And it's bills like HB 900 that deserve their attention. Those are the type of bills that parents want to see our legislators carrying when it comes to education.
Yeah, 100%. I will definitely be making phone calls, and I'll be down there, Tuesday. So HB 1605 is being heard tomorrow. So I will definitely submit my testimony.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to. We cannot have that kind of state bureaucracy control that this is. We need to. We need to get the State Board of Education more involved in curriculum, because they're accountable to voters, and then curriculum should be a local issue. And this bill, I have a real problem with it.
Yeah, and this statewide curriculum is all online. And we are learning more and more that our kids do terrible when they're educated online.
Well, this is the bill that when we've talked about this before on our panel, I think, where they want to make facilitators, and they want facilitators, not teachers. And teaching is an art, and teaching classical, that's such a joke that he says that this is classical curriculum. Classical curriculum is all about, it's about teaching. It's not at all about facilitating. And so
exactly.
So it's just all around bad. Yeah.
It is. Well, I know you have to go. You have traveling to do later today. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for all of your hard work related to stopping the sexualization of kids. No one has any idea how hard you work, but I do. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Melissa. And same to you.
All right. Have a good day.
Okay. Bye, everybody.